What's going on, everybody? It is Monday, which means it's time to go over the question I posed to all of you from last week. And the beauty of all of these questions, whenever you guys ask me questions or I ask you questions, is there is not a right or a wrong answer. They're just opinions. They're just, what is your preference? And as I've said many times, the whole point of collecting is to be buying things that bring you joy, things that make you happy. If you like cards that are ungraded, buy ungraded cards. If you like graded cards by a certain company, buy graded cards of this certain company. If you want high grade, if you want low grade, if you want mint, if you want X mint, whatever it is that you're into is what you should be collecting. And if you go to the root, the original foundation of collecting, it's really about collecting players that you like and players from the team that you root for, which are generally the players that you like. And that's what I like about this question is it's, well, if you could only pick one though, who's the one? Who's the one player that you would collect if you could only collect one player? Now, I like having variety in my collection, variety of years. I like having some newer stuff. I like having some older stuff. I like having some pre-war stuff. I like having some top stuff and then some, things that are a little bit more unique. I like variety, which is what makes this question particularly difficult for someone like me. Now, a lot of you out there are collectors of one particular player. And so this is a very easy question, but a lot of us have a wide variety. So I got obviously a lot of great answers, a lot of different opinions, Mantle, Mays, Clemente, Aaron, and then, some older players like Ruth and some newer players. And it's not like anybody could go wrong here, because we have to be remembering to collect what we like. The worst thing that I think people do is collect things that other people like because they think other people will like their cards. Don't ever fall for that. Always collect the things that you like. And if other people don't like it, that's fine. In fact, if other people don't like what you like, that's almost a good thing because it means it's going to be cheaper. It means there's going to be less demand for it. So you're going to be able to buy it for cheap. So if you really, really like something that nobody else seems to like, that's great for your collection. Let's look at these 5 choices from all of you on the one player you would collect and why you would collect that player. And I think not only are they all great answers, but they're all great answers for different reasons. Let's take a look at the first one. Choosing one player is a tough call. It made me think about why I love to collect vintage cards. I think it comes down to a love of history and the aesthetics of older cards. Jackie Robinson is a big check mark for both. I love to look at the 48 Leaf cards, as well as Topps 1953, 54, and 56. I would have to have a player from each of those sets. I chose Jackie because he was a great ball player who made a significant impact on the history of our country. If I could only choose one player, I would never regret choosing Jackie. So, how can anybody go wrong with picking Jackie Robinson? One of the most important historical figures in our country and a really, really good player. I mean, when you think about it, that's kind of like the perfect fit. It's kind of the perfect spot. Now, I love history. I love learning about history in all facets, not just history of a sport, but history of our country, how inventors created companies and came up with ideas, how a series of events transpired to get us to where we are, both good and bad, because we can learn from each. And there's obviously a history to our country that is not something that people should be proud of. And one of the people who helped us overcome that negative time in our history is Jackie Robinson. You know, baseball is king at this time. It's got the overwhelming majority of the attention from the sports fandomship out there. And Jackie Robinson crosses a barrier, takes heat for it, is taunted for it, but perseveres through it and changes things forever. And not just for baseball, across all spectrums of society. So, you know, one of the things I like to collect, and I don't talk about it much, is I like to collect some non-sport cards. And some of the non-sport cards that I like to collect are like political people and inventors and historical figures. And I've shared some of those before, you know, with some of the 1952 Look and See cards that I have. You know, like I've got a Paul Revere, right? And I've got a George Washington. And I've got, you know, a Henry Ford. Those historical figures, to me, are extremely interesting and important to our history. Well, collecting a Jackie Robinson is like collecting a historical figure card and a societal hero and a baseball hero. It's kind of like, it's kind of all-encompassing what he represents. When I originally asked this question to you, I kind of took a step back and I said, well, what would I say? And I kind of thought about it for a while. And after thinking about it, I said, I think it's Jackie Robinson. And then I texted my dad and I said, Dad, I think if I were to collect one player, it would be Jackie Robinson. And I don't have a single Jackie Robinson card. The one guy, if I could collect anyone, I think I would pick Jackie Robinson. And I don't have any of his cards. And I said to him, I need to change that soon, very soon. And as a result, Jackie Robinson has gone toward the very top of some of my searches on different auction sites and at card show. I went to a card show just the other day. And when I was at the card show, one of the things I had my eye out for the most were Jackie Robinson cards, because I need to start collecting Jackie Robinson cards for all the reasons I just mentioned. Great choice. Let's look at the second one. This is easy. Ryne Samberg is my favorite all-time athlete. When my son became interested in cards in the early 2000s, we ripped packs and bought cards together. The rhinos were mine and the rest were his. Every time I find a Samberg card that I don't have, it brings me back memories of playing second base in Little League. The rainy summer days spent watching WGN or the Saturday game of the week with my buddies. The best memory is collecting with my son and how excited he would get on the rare occasion that we pulled the Samberg insert, ripping packs. Another awesome answer. We all talk about, all the time, collecting what you like. We all talk about collecting the players that you like and the cards that you like. But then a lot of us tend to continue to be pulled toward the cards that we think have a lot of upside potential. I was at a card show on Saturday, just a couple of days ago. And when I was at that card show, I was going through a box of a lot of 1980s stuff and looking for nostalgia cards, because that's one of the things I like to collect, or stuff from my childhood. The all-stars, the MVP candidates from when I was a kid. And I'm flipping through there, and they had an asking price for a Topps Ryne Samberg rookie card of $10. And I'm like, man, Ryne Samberg was an absolute stud. An absolute stud. when there was not a lot of power and production coming out of second base, when second base was a mostly defensive position at the time. I'm sitting there going, Ryan Samberg was awesome. And his cards, I don't think we're going to wake up in 5 years and have Ryan Samberg rookie cards be worth $500. But collecting them because it was your favorite player, because in Little League you played second base and you looked up to him, because you'd come home from school and turn on WGN and watch the Cubs game and see Ryan Samberg playing and you admired him. And then on top of that, to be collecting with your kid and sharing a bond with a kid, your kid, and that bond that you share includes the excitement of pulling a certain player. And this being that player brings you back to not just your childhood and playing baseball and collecting cards, but collecting cards at a time with a person that means so much. See, a lot of us love to collect cards from our childhood because there's so much joy and there's so many good memories from that time. And we want to relive it. So a lot of people are drawn to cards from the period when they were a kid. And you know, I said that to my dad just the other day. We were on the way home from the card show. And I said, yeah, you know, I picked up a couple of cards today because they just kind of were nostalgic from my childhood. He goes, yeah, that's the reason I pick up cards from the late 50s and early 60s, because they bring me back to that time from my childhood. And that's exactly what collecting Ryan Samberg cards does, especially when you were pulling those packs and ripping those packs with your kid and have those memories that you get to be nostalgic, not just your individual nostalgia, but the nostalgia of sharing that time with your own child. Awesome answer. Such a great but very difficult question to answer. So many iconic players in all four major sports. But being a Yankee fan, the player that I would collect if I could afford it would be Lou Gehrig. A player who is very humble, put up incredible numbers across the board in my opinion. Laugh if you like, was underappreciated as far as his stats go. One can only imagine, had he not fallen victim to this terrible disease, what his final numbers would have been. But despite the stats, again, just his humble and soft-spoken demeanor and what he meant for the game of baseball, this player fits the bill for me. Another commenter says, my one player has to be Lou Gehrig. Humble beginnings, phenomenal talent, a true gentleman, a class act, a leader, a role model among role models, a heroic person who left the game he loved with dignity and grace and has impacted so many lives since he left us back in 1941. Another great one. And not just great because the player was great, but great because the human was great. The person was great. If you look across sports, if you just look across humanity, some of the most popular people are the people who were great humans and great humans to other humans and represent the good in humanity. And that's part of the legacy of a Lou Gehrig, a humble, soft-spoken person, a person who's willing to go in front of the world and show emotion and show dignity, a person who's willing to come from a humble start, overcome that, and grow into extreme fame. There's so many things in there that are admirable. You know, when you look across all sport, you know, a lot of people talk about Derek Jeter. The thing about Derek Jeter is he was an incredible hitter. But Derek Jeter is a good guy. He's just a good person. Same thing with a Joe Montana. Joe Montana is a good person. A lot of these athletes, all sports, Roger Federer, great person. Tom Watson, great person. Some of the people that are the biggest icons in different sports are not just icons because they were good. They're icons because how they treated people. Brooks Robinson is another one. Ted Williams is another one. There's a long list of these types of players who treat people right. In these people out there, and we all know the lists, we all know the guys out there. And I'm not taking anything away from like the guys that were just like a killer on the court or the field. Like, I respect Jordan's killer mentality and Kobe's killer mentality. Like, I respect that they wanted to win. But the thing for me that I respect more than anything is a player who wants to win, but also is a good person. I think that Lou Gehrig, his story is incredible, right? It's an incredible story. He was an incredible talent. Who knows how much longer he could have played. And that's one of the reasons his cards are so expensive. Well, for one, he doesn't have a ton of cards. But the cards that he does have are really, really expensive because there's such a demand for someone who is an exceptional talent and an exceptional person. It's insane high demand. And I think about 3 or 4 people mentioned Lou Gehrig as their choice. And it was even, joked about that, if I could afford Lou Gehrig cards, it would be Lou Gehrig. But the common theme between all the answers, the common theme between just the 2 answers that I just read, tells you everything about how revered Lou Gehrig is. I think when we all get to our final days, when we all get to our own demise and the the later half and not even half, later years of our own lives, one of the things that will matter the most to all of us, whether we think it will yet or not, is how does the world think of us? How do the people that we interacted with in life think of us? There are people out there. There are people out there who are willing to run anyone over to accomplish what they want. And then there are people out there who have goals and they work hard, but along the way, they make time for other people. They give energy and thoughtfulness to other people. And I think there will be a difference for people when they look back on their life. Even Bob Cousy. Bob Cousy has long been outspoken about how he has a lot of regret for how he treated people when he was younger. And it's one of the reasons I think that to this day, he signs through the mail autographs for free. You could send Bob Cousy a card. He will personalize it and sign it and send it back. I think it's just one way that he can show that he's changed and he's realized that being a good person is the most important thing. And being a good person and being humble and being thoughtful is one of the reasons that Lou Gehrig is so loved. My one and only player run to collect would be Pete Rose, insofar as watching him progress as a player through the years, add to that his uniform variations and position changes from second base to outfield to third base, and finally first base, just to showcase his flexibility and talent and sheer will to compete and win. Not to mention when you put all his playing years cards issues and yes, throw in an 88 manager and his best all-star card, you have 3 complete 9 pockets of one player's playing career, which is nothing short of amazing. Pete Rose is such an interesting one. He's so popular still. I mean, look at the price of his rookie card. His rookie card is still extremely expensive. When I have questions like this, when I have topics like this, people are constantly talking about how much they love Pete Rose. See, America loves winners, America loves power, and America loves hard work. And when you think of a guy like Pete Rose, he's definitely a hard worker. When somebody has to continue to reinvent themselves in order to continue to be exceptional, and there are a lot of players that have done this. There are a lot of players that have changed positions. There are a lot of players that have changed the style in which they play to continue to be, very, very successful. And Pete Rose does that. He's a hard worker, and he desperately wants to win. Desperately wants to win at all costs. And I love the fact that so many people still love Pete Rose. And the other thing about Americans is Americans are forgiving. Americans are willing to put the past behind and move on. It's like part of the DNA of the country. So when you have a guy like Pete Rose, who worked his tail off, who continued to reinvent himself, who would do anything to win, and then along life makes some mistakes, I think the overwhelming majority of people are willing to move on from that. They're willing to not hold a grudge on that. And because of that, I think it says a lot. He's a great symbol. He's a great symbol of Americans. Wants to be forgiven, wants to move on, works hard, reinvents himself, and his passion is the thing for me personally that I'm most impressed with. The guy is so passionate. Even now you watch interviews with him and he'll talk about different at-bats and he'll talk about times he faced certain pitchers and what pitches they threw him and how he adjusted and the art of hitting and he's still so passionate about it. It's pretty incredible. And he's super popular to this day, and I totally understand why. Jim Palmer. Foremost, look at his 1976, 77, 79, 81, and 83 cards. I don't know of any other player from that era who has so many game action cards. In mid-pitch with the crowd in the background, adding a wash of colors behind him. Even his early cards, 66 to 72, which have posed shots, are not close-up, hat off, boring face shots. They are all cool poses with him smiling. His 73 and 74 cards, even though they are not as vibrant as, for example, his 83, are still mid-pitch. The majority of his cards are just cool to look at. The orange of his cap and jersey seem to add to the beauty of his cards, as well as orange banners and such that Topps did that some years. His 82 Fleer and 82 Topps in action are cool action cards too. Add to that, he is undervalued and people forget how dominant he was in the 70s. Look on the back of his 84 card and study his career statistics. Ironically, my favorite Jim Palmer card is the 1975 Mini, a boring close-up. It was the first 1975 Topps Mini I ever owned as a kid in the early to mid-'80s, and the orange border and image are forever etched into my mind. There are a couple of reasons why I love this answer, and I had to include it into one of the featured responses. The whole thing with cards is they're art, right? They're like little pieces of art. And the condition is art, and the image is art, and the design is art. And the way that it is described in this comment as to why he loves Jim Palmer cards, and that he loves the images, and he loves the action in the images, and he loves the colors in the images. He's talking about art. He's talking about the card themselves, the colors, the movement, the shot. And the beauty of the card is really why he seems to be drawn to Jim Palmer. And I think a lot of us forget about that. We go, oh, I just want to have a Hank Aaron card. It doesn't matter to us that the image on that particular Hank Aaron card isn't really that good of an image. Like, we just ignore that because we want to have Hank Aaron. Or we say, I want, Willie Mays cards because I think Willie Mays cards are going to go up. But then we pick a Willie Mays card and the actual look of the design of that particular card is not really super attractive. But this is talking about he loves Jim Palmer cards because of the colors in Jim Palmer cards, because of the style of pictures in the Jim Palmer cards, and because he's a great player. And even referencing on the back the stats. I mean, if somebody goes through, and I know a lot, there was a time where we were all very stat oriented in sports, and we're losing some of that. And I don't know why. Are we losing some of that because we're not looking at newspaper stats and internet stuff has changed how easy it is to access? I don't know what it is, but if you look statistically at Jim Palmer during the 1970s, his ERA, his strikeouts, his win-loss totals, he was dominating. He was really, really good. And his cards are so inexpensive. Which is also referenced, it's like they're beautiful cards of a really good pitcher, and they're super cheap. So it's like, yeah, if I'm going to collect cards, we want to get the most bang for our buck. We want to get a good deal. We want to get value. Jim Palmer has value. Even his rookie card is inexpensive. But aside from his rookie card, all of his other cards are insanely inexpensive. When we're collecting cards, I would encourage us to not forget about the beauty of the card itself. When I think about beautiful cards, I think about things like the 1953 Topps Eddie Matthews card or 53 Topps Satchel Paige card, right? I think about, for me, a beautiful card is the 55 Jackie Robinson, the 53 Bowman Color Warren Spahn. Like, to me, those are beautiful cards. Beautiful. Don't forget about not just collecting a player, like the question states, but collect the player, but also collect the beautiful cards and the beautiful cards of that player. I think those were some terrific responses this week. And I think that those terrific responses hit on so many different important points that we can't lose sight of. Whether you're a historical significant person, in addition to being a great athlete, whether you're a good human being, which draws us to you and your cards, whether it's the cards being beautiful themselves. These are not just pieces of cardboard that have value attached to them. They're more than that. Well, at least they're more than that to me. And I think for most of you, it's the same. So don't forget that we're not just buying these items that could go up and down in value like cryptocurrency. What we're doing is we're buying a story, we're buying an image, we're buying some beautiful item that we get to enjoy along the way as well. Great answers. And you have your work cut out for you for this coming week because those answers were so great. Now, I asked a similar question to this several weeks ago, the question for this week. And to me, I love hearing people's stories about who they collect, why they collect it, who they think is overvalued, who they think is undervalued, how they like to collect, how they like to pick up cards. All of that is interesting to me. But the thing that's most interesting to me is trying to figure out how do people decide where to spend their money? Because we all have, a set amount of resources. None of us have I don't have an endless amount of money. So if I don't have an endless amount of money, where am I going to spend my money? And where am I going to spend it first? Where am I going to spend it this time? So the question is, if you were to go to the National with $1,000, how would you spend it? And the reason I think that I say the National in particular is because pretty much everything is at the National. So the question is, if you had $1,000 and you could spend it on anything right now, what would you buy? Would you buy one card? Would you buy a bunch of $20 cards? Would you try to put together a set? Would you buy two $500 cards? But which cards would you buy? What is at the very top of your want list right now? What is the card right now that you want more than anything? Up to $1,000. So you have $1,000. How would you spend it right now? And the other reason this is interesting, and even though we had a somewhat similar question a few weeks ago, is this question is constantly changing. The answer is constantly changing. Just like I said a minute ago. I was looking at someone, talking to myself saying, wait a second. I might pick Jackie Robinson as the one guy I would collect, and I don't have any Jackie Robinson cards. And Jackie Robinson cards shot up my list because I'm like, I need one. I need to have a Jackie Robinson card in my collection. For me. Someone else might feel that way about Mickey Mantle, or Willie Mays, or Stan Musial, or Ken Griffey Jr., or Wade Boggs, or Pete Rose. So how would you spend $100? How would you spend $1,000 if you were at the National today? How would you spend it? I look forward to hearing your responses and sharing them with you next week.